Hey, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the Writer's Bookshelf. So today we're going to cover our final book on characterization that's not a direct reference, and yet it kind of is a reference, so it's more of a hybrid book. But it's one that I think is very important for your bookshelf, and this one is called The Writer's Guide to Character Traits. It's by Linda Edelstein, Ph.D. And the Ph.D. is the kicker for this book because she is a licensed therapist, and she's writing a book on character traits for writers that helps them develop their characters into believable characters regardless of where they're coming from. So it's a great guide to have for writing backstory in particular. But even when you go through and telling your story, you can look at certain character traits that might come up in the process of telling the story, which is also good too when you're trying to find character arcs, when you're trying to get from three-dimensional changes from one point to another. This book will give you enough ideas, I think, that will help you to identify what the character's strengths and weaknesses are and how they might be able to grow from that. So what's interesting about this book is it does give you descriptions of the character types and whatnot, but it also gives you these charts. So let me just show you real quick what an average chapter looks like so you can kind of see what we're going for. So not that one. We're going to look at chapter 5, I believe. Criminal types. We'll look at criminal types, as a follow-up to last week's episode. If I can find the beginning, these are long chapters. So each chapter will begin, in a nice kind of usual way. It'll give you a summary of what the idea is about, and then it'll go into an explanation of, what the overview is for a particular type. So with chapter 5, it's about criminals. So it'll tell you briefly. That's going to cover criminal types, but then every so often it'll have these little boxes in here that shows you either new information or motivations and things. And so, like for example, in that box, you have motives of perpetrators from the mildly awful to the genuinely evil. You have ridding oneself of obstruction, a person who's in the way, passion, resentment, dislike, or hatred, belief that the outcome merits the deed, and so on. And then what you have, it really makes this book the reference part of the title. You get into these little subtitles down here. I don't know if you can see that. So you have types of people who commit non-deadly, non-sexual criminal acts. So these would be like probably the, I don't know if they're misdemeanors, but they're the less threatening to individuals, more to like property. So you have the arsonist below. What it does is it gets into who the arsonist is, and then it gets into the traits of the arsonist over here. And then you have underneath that you have the confidence specialists. Those are the people who are like Ocean's 11, where they're grifting, and it goes into the synopsis of what they're about and what makes them who they are, and so on. And that's just the first section of the chapter. It goes on through a whole list of character types that fit that type of subtitle. So it goes all the way to the white collar criminal. And it goes into traits, and then you go into an entire new section. So you'll see they have something called new information. This is because this is the second edition of the book. So this is anything they're adding to this edition that wasn't a factor of the original. So an example of a new information is one of the newer white collar crimes is computer related. This is usually done by an ex-computer programmer, engineer, or data entry clerk who knows techniques of erasing information. The goal is to steal money by moving it to an accessible location or to sell information. Additional gain is derived from proving oneself smarter than others and by using one's computer knowledge as power. It's actually not unlike my character in Computer Nerd, sort of, kind of. But they'll have these addendums to the book, so that if you have an earlier edition, the newer edition will have information that the old one didn't. That's how second editions work. But then it goes on to yet another subtitle. So now you have, or subcategory. So this is where you have types of rapists and other who commit sexual crimes, and it goes into that whole list. And so you have all these different types of characters that you might draw from. And that's sort of the point of this book, is you're looking for character types that might populate your story and then how to make them believable. So one of the reviewers, like I was looking for it in the book, but I might have seen it online instead. One of the reviewers was talking about how this book was like a little mini psychology course in one place. And I definitely agree that that's true, because this is more of a psychology book than a writing book. And sometimes, again, you'll have charts like this where they give you the bullet point snapshots of comparative stages of things. So like this here is the stages of marital separation. You have early, which includes distress, fear, sadness, vulnerability, inability to concentrate, anxiety, and so on. Then you have relief, which is euphoria, confidence, hopeful about new opportunities, realization that partner is now not needed. And then you have adjustment, which is loneliness, a barren world, acceptance that there is no future with partner, in search of respite from feelings, and so on. And so it goes through these progression tables too, if you need that kind of reference. But again, this is from a licensed psychologist, so the information, it's thorough, but it's accurate, I think. I say that being someone who never studied psychology as a profession. I've only taken a couple courses in college, but based on what I know, no, it's just, I think it's incredible sorts, and the way she develops these points, I think she does it in a way that makes it very accessible. It's not highbrow. I mean, it sounds like it should be, but it's easy to read. It's not the kind of book you have to sit down and digest. Like, I actually forced myself to read this from cover to cover just for this video, but I normally probably wouldn't read it the way I did, because it's not the kind of book that really needs to be read that way. It's more the kind of book where you will want to read the chapter section so you know what you're getting into. But then when you get to like the charts, I think you can technically, the advantage of reading ahead is at least know what's in there, so that if you do have a plan for a book and you have a particular type of character you want to add, this might give you an opportunity to look for that type of character, and give you a preview of what that character might be like when added to your story. But I don't think it's the kind of book you actually have to read cover to cover. In fact, I mean, unless you just like that kind of reading. If you're the kind of person who loves a good psychology show, or psychology-driven show, I mean, you might like this book from cover to cover. You might read it for fun, although there's some things in here that are a little hard to get through, because they, again, when you deal with psychology, you're dealing not with the happy stuff. There is some messy stuff that shows up, and I think one of the warnings she gives you, if I'm not mistaken, there is an introduction to the book, and I'm not going to read it, but you can. I believe there's a point where she tells you that you may want to be careful when you go in here. Pretty sure. I'm just guessing, but I believe that she tells you in the beginning that if you have any kind of trigger warnings, if there's anything in your history or your past, if you've been abused in any way, if you've been a victim of a crime, if there's something in your history that you're sensitive to, you may want to go into this with a warning. And so that's, I would say, the one thing about getting this book is it's worth having, but make sure you're of healthy mind before you pick it up. If you have a trigger mechanism, you may want to be careful when you get to certain parts of the book in case your trigger happens to show up. The other thing is, if you've been healed, that's great. Happy for you. It might be that you can approach it then, and so you kind of know where you are. But if you do find yourself in a place where you get the book, you want to read through it, and then something triggers in you that you weren't ready for, it wouldn't hurt to be in a place where you can break down if you need to. So I wouldn't read this book in public. I would read this somewhere where you're comfortable, where you're safe, where you have somebody you can call if you need to. So that's my one caveat of this particular book is, read it with an open mind, read it looking for character types, but read it knowing that, if you have a wound in your history, it might trigger something. Just be careful. And if it's not this book, then it's going to be one of the ones I cover later. I would still say be warned that this book might do that because of it goes into the details of what character types are. But I'm actually, now that I think about it, might be another one I'm going to be doing in a few weeks that fits that warning. But either way, you should hopefully approach these books with the understanding that when you're dealing with character psychology, you're dealing with the messy stuff as much as you're dealing with the happy stuff. And the messy stuff, it's messy for a reason. It's not comfortable. So just be aware of that going into it. But other than that, I think it's a great resource to have on your shelf. There's a funny story I want to tell you real quick before we end it. This is the book that I thought I owned years ago. Again, I'll show you the cover. It's a pretty memorable cover. It's got the puzzles, it's got the eye, and I know I've seen it in the bookshelf or bookstore, and I knew it was one that I wanted. And I thought for sure I had bought it. So I remember going through and looking for it because I wanted to read it. And I went through all my stuff. I went through my bookshelf. I went through all my boxes where I keep books that have not been shelved. Went through my print receipts. I could not find any evidence at all that I bought this book, but I could have sworn I'd seen it in here, like sitting like on my shelf, and I'm like, I can't find it anywhere. I can't find a record of having ever bought it. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. But anyway, this is back when the Writer's Digest still had their online bookstore, which I miss. I really miss that. People from Writer's Digest, if you're still watching, if you are watching this video, please bring it back. I love that online bookshop. Your rates were reasonable. It was easy to find books. If you go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, it's so hard to find a resource anymore. If you don't already know what you're looking for, it's really hard to find good resources, because even if you look up Writer's Digest books, it's going to give you like the old archives. It doesn't bring up new stuff. And it drives me nuts. And I like your old system. Bring it back. I know that you've been bought out. Tell the people who own you now. Bring it back. Anyway, that's a side rant. But this is back when that store still existed. It was near the end of the store. They had they're having one of their annual sales. I think they have like 2 or 3 a year, or did back when they had the online store. And this book was only selling for $6. And so I'm like, I know I have it. I looked everywhere. I couldn't find it. I'm like, you know what? I'll just buy the book. Maybe I don't own it. Maybe I thought I bought it. Maybe I just never got it. But whatever it is, whatever the story was, I didn't have it. I looked everywhere and I just gave up. So I went ahead and ordered the book. And so, I got that with a bunch of the other ones I'm covering in this season, including, no, not including anything that I covered yet. I'll cover later. But yeah, I went ahead and ordered all these books, and then when this one came, it wasn't actually this one. They gave me this children's glossary. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I wanted this book, and they sent me the wrong one. Unfortunately, Writer's Digest, they were cool. They actually sent me this one for free, because even though I had ordered this one, they didn't really send it to me for free. What they actually let me do is they let me keep the one they sent me by accident. So I got 2 books for the price of this one, which was $6. So that was my interesting story. But this book and I have an interesting history, and I wanted to share it while I'm talking about it because I think it's cool. But anyway, that all said, again, it's a book that you can read it. It's not just reference. This is why I'm saying like it's the last of our official books on character, but it's not. I think it still qualifies as a reference resource, which we're going to have a lot more of in the next 3 or 4 weeks. But I do think that this is one that you'll like if you really want to get into the heart of who your characters are, but also put them on a track that makes sense, that's believable. And this is, and I'm going to probably end on this, but this brings me to a point about character development that I think is really important as a writer. I talked to the last couple of videos, I've been talking about how one of my weaknesses as a writer is to come up with motivations, come up with characters that I think are consistent, believable. I didn't mention the consistency, but that's something else I struggle with, even with the computer nerd that I've been talking about, because I revised it and I like what it says now. One of the things I still kind of have in the back trigger of my mind is I don't yet know if the character is stable enough to really qualify as a continuous character, as a character that is so believable that he's definitely not grounded. Because again, if you ever read it, you'll see how his perspective is very limited to his ability to kind of process reality. But I shouldn't have said that. It's spoiling things. Just go blah, 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 blah when you read it, so you forgot that I said that. But his consistency of character, I think, is okay. But if I have a big question mark over my head, if this is the one thing I'd want an editor to tell me. Like, again, I haven't sent these books out to editors. I know I should, but they cost a lot of money that I don't have. And sometimes you have to make contingencies when you don't have access or the ability to do something. Sometimes you have to go with on your instinct. Sometimes you have to go on the trust that it'll work. Well, that's the one area where I don't think my trust is going to be strong enough without the reader feedback, is the consistency of the character. And so when you come up with these traits, one of the things I like about this book is you can hopefully have a model of consistency in place so that you're less likely to take your characters off the rails, even if the opportunity arises for him to go off the rails. Because if your character does something that is not believable, you've ruined your story. And so that's one thing that this book it does a good job not only reminding you of, but it shows you how to stay on track. Not in the hand-holding way, but just in the referential way. It reminds you that this character, if you have a character that is, we'll just say random page here, if he has Korsakoff syndrome, whatever that is, it's a physical mind-body disorder. It's under the traits of amnesia, so it's a type of amnesia. He'll have, the physical cause might be severe thiamine deficiency, usually brought on by long-term alcohol abuse, diet-induced syndrome seen in prisoners of war. Less common causes include thalamic, ischemic attack and brain aneurysm. There's ataxia, which is the jerking or irregular movements. You have gross confusion, visual abnormalities, profound memory disorder, incapable of learning anything new because new information cannot be contained. And that's Korsakoff syndrome. If your character has Korsakoff syndrome, well, now you know how to make sure that he's believable on the page. Don't give him a strong memory. You can potentially give him a bad diet. These are things you can use to your advantage in order to create that character and make him strong. So that's essentially what you're getting out of this book. And it's a long read, but it's not unlike the other books I covered, you don't actually have to read it cover to cover. You just need to read the sections that explain what the chapter is about, and then anything in between that has actual text you should read. But then when you get into the bullet points, that's where I think you can probably if you're rushed for time, not that you should be rushed for time when you're researching, but you can certainly use that on an as-needed basis. The advantage of reading it all the way through like I did is at least you know what's in there, so you know what you're looking for. But even if you're stuck, there is an index at the end that you can use to find your way around. So if there's a particular trait, and they do categorize it by traits. So they have traits groups, they have disorders and problems with adults. If there's a particular thing that you want to identify, Chapter 14 is the index, and that gives you the ability to find your way around quickly if you need to. But I do think it's a good idea to read it in full if you can, because you will want to know what's in there. Because you might find a character who interests you. As you read through these traits, something may really leap out at you, and you might think, wow, I could really form a great story there. Or maybe, if you're writing a series and you're running out of ideas for your next book, having that next, that guy with the Korsakoff syndrome or whatever it's called, might be an interesting witness, in your murder mystery. The only guy who witnessed the crime is the one who has Korsakoff syndrome. I know I'm saying it wrong, but he's probably not very reliable because memory is part of the problem. He's got amnesia. So how do you tell a story about an amnesiac who's the only witness to a murder? Figure it out. So anyway, all right, well, that's all for today. Next week we'll be doing. I'll start my brief mini series on reference books for the characters. It'll be very interesting. Do make sure you come back for that. There'll be short videos, unlike the last few that I've been doing, because there's not a lot to say. This is going to be more about just showing you what they are and kind of sending you off on your way. But I do think that it's important that you're aware that they're out there. So I'm covering them in videos because this whole series is about the books you should have on your shelf. And the ones I'm going to be covering coming in the next, I think it's 4 videos, are going to be all from the same group of people, same author, same styles. And it's the same series, essentially. But like this one here, you're going to want it on your shelf because it's going to really help you have not just compelling characters, but believable characters. And ultimately, if your characters aren't believable, it doesn't matter how strong their motivations are. It doesn't matter how much conflict they bring to the story. It's going to fall flat, especially if your reader knows the traits and says you are not applying those traits. If you have, I'll just use a rough example. Everyone, I hope, knows what anorexia is. An eating disorder where you just don't eat. You might make food for other people. It's one of the traits of an anorexic is to make food for other people but not to consume it yourself. And one of the psychology traits of it is it doesn't matter how skinny you are, you think you're fat. And if you introduce an anorexic to your story and you have them binging and purging, that's not anorexia, that's bulimia. So you're mixing the diseases, and you have to get that right, because there are enough people out there who are going to know the difference. And it's hard to work your way through that, but it's part of the job of being a good writer, is to look for those elements of research. And I admit that it's not the enjoyable part, at least not for me. I don't like doing it. I don't like having to be accurate. I want to just tell the story. It's my nature to want to just get to the story and research later. It's always been my nature. It's been, I think I told you in another video, I'm a procrastinator. I don't want to do the extra work if I can avoid it. But part of being a good writer is to do the extra work. So that means learning who your characters not only are, but what makes them tick. And that's where you need to learn the psychology of your character, and that means learning psychology. I mean, hate to say it, it's not. If you're a writer, your job is not just to become a writer. Your job is to become a psychologist, a therapist, an expert. This is why I don't know why anybody wants to ever become a writer. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world. I feel like I'm an idiot having gone this route, honestly. I feel like I could have just been anything else, been more successful, been in a better house, have a much clearer head. But no, I had to become a writer, and so, so now I have to drink coffee and keep myself sane. But that's the life we choose, and you've chosen it if you're watching this video, and because you chose it, you should get this book. All right, that's it. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all the things that YouTubers tell you to do. Come back next week for the next episode. We're going to take a brief pause, I think, after the next block. The next block will be the little mini-series I'm going to be doing, and then I'm probably going to take a week or two off between those and the follow-up books, only because the books that will follow are books I don't yet own as of this recording. And I know I want to do them, because I know season 2 is about craft. It's about making sure you can write a compelling story, not just structurally, but through character development, through scene development, and everything. And I want to make sure I get the best books to represent the most important topics. And there's one very important topic that I have one book that covers that topic, but it's an old book, one that I don't think is practical to buy anymore, even though it's probably a good book. I think it came out in 2004, and I don't want to give you guys a book that might be expensive to buy, especially when it's thin and all that. So I want to get you guys something a little more recent that I know is good, and so I'm going to be taking likely a 2 or 3 week break between. It'll be I think 4 episodes from now is when this part of the season will take a break. Again, it'll be 2 or 3 weeks, and then we'll resume with the rest of the season. But that should hopefully give me enough time to catch up with all the reading that I need to do. And then I'm also trying to decide if there's a couple books on my season 2 list that I want to push back to 3, because I think there's 1 or 2 that I'm really on the fence about how much I needed this year. So we'll see. But anyway, that's the state of the series so far. But I'm glad you're here, still watching. And come on back next week. So we'll continue. Alrighty, that's it. Thanks for watching. Bye.